Today I'm going to be talking about some stories that was related to me on the familiar and popular media site from people that live in and around the Appalachian Mountains, and they related some of their personal stories with me. Number one, this lady said she was about 15, and a bunch of them got together with a Ouija board, of course, out on a dirt road near her house. They asked if someone was there, and someone asked if it was related to one of them as well. Different questions. Totally random and weird. The board said that it was related to them. A second later, they all heard a scream and a bearded face peer through the wall of the house at them. They all ran. When she got back home, she asked her her papaw, if he had had any relatives that had passed on in that area. He said he had. There was an uncle who was a miner, and he had drowned getting water for his mule. She said it was really scary, but she never touched another Ouija board after that. Number two, we had built a house brand new. Soon thereafter, each of us started seeing a white figure race up our entry staircase at different times of the day and night. We had a window washer refused to come back because of what he kept seeing and what he called a haunt run down upstairs back and forth in the hallway when he was out there washing the windows. Now my uncle and I and my kids at different times saw what they thought was a large white bird in the house. Couldn't tell what type of bird it was, but definitely there was a big oversized white bird in my house. An adult babysitter actually told us she couldn't come back because she was there one night with the kids, and our alarm got set off, our burglar alarm. And she called the police because pool balls were moving up on their own downstairs on the pool table, some jumping clean off the table. I had about enough of this, and I ended up having a priest come and bless the house, and it all stopped. Number three, after my mom's death, I missed her terribly. I still do. Every morning, whenever she spent the nights with us, she would pucker head around the corner of my kitchen and scare us, going boo, all the time, and would make us laugh and jump out of our skin. After she passed away, I was so lonesome. I missed her so much. One day, while I was doing my wash, I never thought of her then, but was standing at my dryer folding towels when I heard my mother's voice go, boo, right over my back. I laugh out loud now, but at the time it scared me to death. It startled me, and my big dog ran backwards up my leg growling, and then laid down and whimpered, which he never done. I smiled and said, okay, you got me, Mom. After that, I never had any more episodes. Remind you, I've owned a funeral home and worked there for a number of years and never believed in ghosts until I said I saw my mom and she let me know that she's still with me. I love you, Mom. Number four. This is a little story of mine. It's not very long, but it scared me to death, so I hope you all can understand the kind of situation I was in and how you would react in that situation. It was twilight, and I turned around to go back into my house, and there was about a foot in front of me. Out of nowhere, I saw this big gray head with big black eyes, kind of short like me. I screamed and I ran back in the house. Now, a lot of people wouldn't believe me over the years, so I kind of kept this to myself. But honestly, I think it's what they all call a gray alien. It's kind of like the ones you see out in Roswell, out west. So that was my story. I have not seen anything since then, but I still kind of feel like there's something else going on because I still have that memory in my head, and now I'm starting to have some health issues that I can't explain. I've went to the doctors and done the right test and all the tests they could think of, blood work and everything, and nothing seems to explain what's going on with me. But I think it may be related to that big gray alien looking thing from years ago. This has been probably 20 years ago. I'm almost 60 years old, and I cannot believe it, but it happened to me. Thank you all for listening. Number 5. I was real close to my granny. I used to go and sit in the swing with her when I was a little girl. After she died, my mama got her swing and she put it in the yard. She ended up putting it on the front porch. I came to see my mom one day. When I went in to sit in the swing, I was sitting out there by myself. And it was like something was sitting by me as I sat down. It kind of shocked me. And then I thought about my granny, and I knew that it was her spirit sitting there swinging on the porch with me. Sat there for, what seemed like forever, but maybe it was only a few minutes. But it made me feel really good knowing that she had come back to see me one more time. Thank you for sharing my story. Number 7. Sandra says she wants to share her story too. Excuse me. I went with my mom to her sister's to visit a family member. I was about 15, standing out on the side of the road. There was a woman. She was bent over, walking with a cane, all dressed in black. She stopped me and asked me, "Where are the girls at?" I said, "Inside talking." I opened the back gate and told her to go to the back door. I watched her leave and go around the back of the house to the gate and go in. I went back around the front of the house. About 10 minutes later, I went inside and said, there was Mom and her sister sitting there drinking coffee. I said, "Where did that lady go?" And they said, "Who are you talking about?" I said, "The lady that I invited in the house. She went around the back, and I showed her where the gate and the door was, and she went in." And she said, "Honey, there was nobody that came in this house." And then they asked what she looked like, and I explained to her, that she was dressed in black and she had walked with a cane. She's kind of bent over. She said, "Lord, that was one of our dearest friends. Sounds just like her. Her name was Jean. She used to come in here and sit down and have drinks with us all the time, but she's been dead for years." Number 8. Sherry says this. Several years ago, I was driving home from work about 2:30 in the morning. As I came around this big curve, something appeared in front of my Trailblazer. Only in the middle of the truck, not only actually on the entire road. It was high enough for me to see it over top my hood. I never hit it, nor did it ever pass by. I thought it was a bear at first, but it disappeared. Less than a mile from there, my engine died on my truck. I got out of the truck and looked, and this is out of the clear blue. This truck had never done this before, never had any problems with the engine or anything. Well, I got it over to the side of the road, put it in park, and tried to start it up, and it started right back up. And I just put ahead and floored it to get back home. I checked the front grill whenever I got up the next morning, but there was no dents, no nothing. Thank you. Number 9. Pat shares this one with us. He says, "I live in a haunted house with cursed land on it. Every day to me is like Halloween." I'll share some of my stories. Some of these hauntings you can get used to over the years and some you don't, like this one. A young man, a friend of my son, lived with us for a while many years ago. He moved out in the middle of the night, wouldn't talk about it, and just left after staying there for months. Well, about 3 months ago, after 10 years of not talking to him, not hearing from him, he calls my son out of the clear blue, an absolute panic attack. He said, I had a dream, and he saw us dying because of the house, and he was particularly concerned about the activity in his old room. Another thing that had happened to us, I gave my sister a huge box of new dolls to give to the church, our local church. Her husband was a minister. They put the box in the house to store. Well, that night, the bed levitated with them in it and then shook violently. When the bed was returned to the floor in the middle of the night, my sister got the dolls out of there and off their property. She actually wrote a book about it. People ended up burning the book or giving it back as soon as they got it. Everything about this experience and this house and people that are in it gets affected in one way or the other. I guess I'm lucky that I'm still around. But most of these people that has been in this house, basically their lives all go to hell. Thank you for sharing my experience. Number 10. Kathleen had a little short story to share with us. She said, I was in my house and I was going down the basement stairs like I always did. And one time when I was going down these same basement stairs, something pushed me from behind. Well, as soon as I started falling down the basement steps, something actually held me in place in air and pulled me back on the step so I didn't fall and go head first into the concrete floor down below. I did not hit the rock wall, the brick wall that was there. I didn't hit the concrete floor. I couldn't understand what was going on and who had saved me. Later on, I was told after, looking at history of the house, there was a lady that had actually passed there. And I was sleeping in her son's room at the time when this happened. I never felt safe after that in that house. I think her son actually saved me from his mom. I ended up getting out of there even though I hated the move. Thank you. Number 11. Janice shares this with us. At the age of 18, several of us went into a house where a man had hung himself upstairs. I was in front. Then there was another girl, and then the two guys with us was going up a flight of steps. It was dark except for light at the top of the stairs. We got near the end and looked into a dark room. Suddenly, there was a large white mist-like figure that rose up out of the floor in that room. We're all so startled we almost feel like we had to get out of that house and start running. So we ended up making it out of the house with no other problems that night. Well, a few days later, after my husband and I was together in that house, years later, he actually had passed away at the age of 47. Well, a couple days after his death, I woke up and I could feel him laying beside me in the bed. Even though I couldn't feel his body physically as solid, I still felt him. It made me feel good that he was still there. I think that house was an attraction for a lot of spirits, and he'd come back because he knew I needed him. That was the last time that I ever felt him beside me. Another thing that had happened, I was in a car wreck as a teen. My girlfriend actually died laying beside me. For days after that, my sister and I could hear footsteps late at night coming upstairs to our room. 2 years ago, here in Florida, I rented a condo that the owner lived in for a long time and died there. I could feel that owner or someone coming around at times. I got up in the middle of the night, walked into the hall, and stepped into what could be considered a freezer. It was so cold. And then in my ear I heard a faint shout, "Go, go." I was wide awake by then, so it was real. It was real as could be. I know I wasn't sleeping. Another thing that happened before I moved out of there, I was brushing my teeth, and then the owner, a fellow, the guy that had died there, whispered, "Hello," behind me while I was brushing my teeth. It scared me to death. I'm glad I moved, but I was never afraid of him. Another thing is, I do not know why I get messages that do not want me in things. I do get these messages all the time. I've got like a guardian angel. And here's my couple of stories about that. A man once tried to abduct me in a parking lot of a big Walmart, but a loud voice in my head said, "Run, run." I did not know who did it, who said it, but I took the advice and I ran and got into my locked car. A man was reaching out for my door with a crazed look in his eye when I looked up. So whoever that was definitely saved me that day. It scared me. Another time, the same voice had told me while I was sitting in a restaurant eating, "Leave, leave." I did. I finally gave in to it and got out. A few minutes later, I got a call from my sister in another state. She was in the ER. She said, "Don't come. Don't worry about it. And I love you." And she hung up the phone. Well, she died soon after. If I would not have heard that voice and heeded that call to go outside and got that call from my sister, I would have never got to speak to her that one last time. And when I was 19, I had a date with a guy I hardly knew. He said, "Hey, let's leave. Let's leave JC City and go to Irwin." I said, "Okay." But then that voice that I had heard all my life says, "Go home. Go home." Well, I made up an excuse why I had to be home, saying I was past my curfew, and I got home and I never did talk to that guy for a while. Well, a week later, that same guy was on the news. He had murdered a man, raped his wife, and shot them both dead right near Irwin, the same place he wanted us to go that night. She had managed to actually live after all this and turned him into the police. I wondered if that voice knew that he would kill me if I left with him that night. Someone is definitely watching over me, and this all is true. I swear to it. Number 12. Charson says there's a little short story that she'd like to recommend to us and tell us about. We lived in this old 2-story house in my hometown about 20 years ago. We would hear things from time to time, and I would hear people, especially walking upstairs, while we was laying in the bed, a lot of times at night. My husband always said he couldn't hear anything, but when I would hear it, our dog would run up and look up the stairs, and he would growl and bark. And a lot of times he was running up the stairs or running down the stairs to see if my little girl had come home from school and had snuck by him. Well, my husband eventually gave in that the dog wasn't just barking because he had lost it or was crazy, that there was actually some substance to it, and he became more of a believer than a skeptic. Thank y'all for sharing my story. Number 14. Here's a couple little short stories from Brian and Paul. Brian says, I saw my first ghost when I was 5. I've always been sensitive to it and seeing and hearing things that other people don't. I think as we get older, our logic takes over and our imagination kind of gets choked out. That being said, I've always kept my imagination, I guess, open because I see these things a lot of times when people doesn't believe me and things end up coming true. But anyone that doesn't believe in ghosts needs to work in the second shift at my last machine shop where I did. We used to sit there and we would be doing our projects for the night, and we would end up having things being moved, tools being moved, and our machines would shut off. And these were machines that you had to physically turn on and off. There wasn't electrical issues because we had the maintenance man come in and look at all of this stuff. Well, none of that ever worked out to be what was going on. We definitely had something there. We actually watched our tools, which machine shop tools are not like people. And that being said, these things would jump up and run. If they had legs, that is, they would take off and go across the room right in front of us. Needless to say, I didn't stay on second shift very much. After that, I ended up moving on from that shop. So I would say to anybody out there that doesn't believe ghosts, something will happen to you in your life to where you will. Thanks for sharing my story. Paul says, a little short one for me, guys. When I was in my front yard one day, in my house, hanging out, just really nice day, and I see this little young lady, very pretty young lady, in a wedding gown, just come walking up my yard. I was like, okay, where did she come from, and what is she doing walking up to me? I don't know her. I've never seen her before. Well, she walks up and stands right beside me. And she just smiles at me. And I smile kind of nervously back. I wasn't really scared because she didn't look menacing or, like couldn't see her eyeballs or all this stuff like they would say, in these horror stories. And I just looked at her and she smiled. And one more time I smiled back and then she disappeared. And that was the last time I'd ever seen her or anything in my house. This is like 4 or 5 years ago. Thank y'all for sharing my story. Number 16. Paul adds in another little short comment and story here as well. He says, I'm like the lady who says that she's somewhat of a sensitive you see on TV all the time. Like I said, I've seen stuff that doesn't make any sense. I've saw UFOs. I've saw Bigfoots. I've saw ghosts. I've had haunts of all sorts in my house and around me, at my friend's house, at businesses, at common places where you walk in. Just everywhere that I've been, I've saw, and there's been things going on, not just to me, but to people around me. So I guess I am like a beacon for them to come to. Well, everybody has told me over the years, as many things has happened to you, Paul, you should go ahead and write a book on all these experiences you've had. Now, I've had several experiences where someone or something screamed at me that would make your blood curl. I never did act on it, never did run from it, because honestly, where was I going to run to at the time? But thankfully, nothing more than that has ever happened. But I'll keep y'all, in touch with everybody just to make sure if anything else goes on, I'll let you know and give y'all the lowdown on what's going on next. Thanks for sharing my story, Mike. Number 17. Keisha says, my first time I ever saw a ghost was when I was like 11. I had a dog go missing, and I really, really love my dog. Everybody has their pets when they're young, and they love them, but mine was like my best friend. Didn't have too many friends, so this was like my best friend. I didn't know where he had gone. I just knew something was wrong, and he would have come back by now. I was thinking to myself, there's had to be something going on. I think he might have got killed. My mother said, don't think like that, Keisha. Don't think like that. He'll come back. Well, I was sitting there for 3 nights in a row, and I dreamed that something happened and he got killed. I was so distraught. I really loved that dog. I prayed every night, please God, let him come back. Please God, let him come back. Please God, don't let him, be hurt anymore. If he's gone, let him go up there with you. Then on the 4th night, I lay there in bed after praying to God all the things I've been praying for the past few nights. The house completely was quiet, and everyone was asleep except for me. I was wide awake. Couldn't go to sleep because of everything going on. I didn't want to dream that dream again that night. It was really, really getting to me after seeing my puppy pass away for 3 nights in a row. I heard a sound coming down the hallway, and I couldn't figure out what it was because I knew everybody was asleep. It sounded like nails tapping on the hardwood floor, kind of like when a dog walks. And it came closer and closer down the long hallway to my room. I listened, and it stops at my door. My door. The door opens. I couldn't see anything. And then you could hear the tapping, the toenails clicking as it got closer, just like my dog would. It ended up coming right up to me by the bed. I was petrified. I couldn't look. I knew all the doors were locked and there's no way nothing could have come into the house. And we didn't have another dog. And Mom and Dad, their door was locked, and so was my siblings. So I don't know what was going on, who it was. All I knew was I didn't want to look. I was a young kid. I was still scared. Even though I was missing my dog, I couldn't fathom why that would be my puppy. Well, there was no way anything could have got in, like I said. So I laid there, eyes clenched shut from the fear. I just laid there so still for minutes. Well, it stops right beside my bed, within inches. And I could hear panting, just like my dog would do. All of a sudden, I knew it was him, but I'm still too terrified to open my eyes, because also at that moment, I don't know how, but I realized that meant he was dead, because I knew he wasn't there in physical form. So I was upset and crying. I laid there frozen in fear, not knowing whether I should reach out to try to touch him, or should I say anything to him. I didn't know what to do. Well, I look over, and there's my dog. He's standing there looking right at me and panting lightly, kind of in his little cute smiley way. He looks at me and he turns around and walks to the bottom of the bed, then back, looks at me again, kind of wagging his tail. He turns around and walks out the door, around the corner, down the hallway, and then I couldn't hear the tapping of the toenails anymore. It was dead silent. That was the last time I ever saw my dog. But thank God that he let him come and see me, because it made it so much easier after all this was said and done to have that good memory and be able to let go. Thanks, Mike, for sharing my story. Number 18. George says, Mike, several years ago, my mom, my dad, my wife, and I was all driving from Irving, Kentucky to Western Liberty, Kentucky, to my wife's uncle's funeral. While I was driving, it was a warm night, and we had, our windows down. And we was on our way back to Irving from Liberty. We was coming up by the Crow Cemetery out there in Irving. And then we saw, looked like a small cloud about 5 feet off the ground. And it came right up to the truck. We slowed down and it came right up to my truck on my side, on the driver's side. It actually went through the windows because we had them down, like I said, and went out the passenger side. And we all felt this. When it come through us, it was like a cold rush. We all was dumbfounded. Needless to say, I put the gas, or my foot back on the gas and took off. Gravel flying everywhere because we didn't know how to react to this. We all got chills from this. But that was my crazy story. Thanks, Mike, for sharing. Number 20. Karen writes, Mike, I got one for you here. Back in 1984, in my hometown, place where I come from, they still had the practice of, the showing, taking your loved ones and keeping the casket open while all your relatives come and saw you before they actually ended up having a funeral for you a couple days later. So back in 84, we was, what we called it was setting up with the dead. It was, like I said, still in place where I came from. Well, my granny had passed away, and they had taken her to the local church. Well, we all come up there to the local church. My family, friends, everyone that knew my granny. There was quite a bit of us in there. And it was late at night. We had been there all day, talking and sharing old memories, just having a good time reliving my granny's memories and what a good person she was and whatnot. Well, the church house door all of a sudden opened. We all turned around and it closed. There wasn't anybody there. It was like there was someone there, but they was invisible. Then we heard footsteps walking down the church aisles. It was like, don't, like someone in hard, boots or hard-soled shoes walking by us. They walked up to my granny's casket, and it stopped for a second. And then you heard a creak, like the casket was moving, even though we watched this. We couldn't see anything, and it wasn't moving, but you could hear a creak, kind of like. Then you heard two sets of footsteps walking away. Tum, 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 tum. Well, the church door ended up opening back up. No lie, Mike. And then it closed. Well, needless to say, it didn't take very long after this happened for the church to empty and everybody go back home and go wherever they was going to go. My preacher actually said that it was my grandpa coming to get Granny and take her home, as he had passed away years before that. That gave me some comfort, even though that scared the bejesus out of me. Thanks, Mike, for sharing my story. Number 21. Barbara writes, Mike, me and my husband was spending the night in a motel in Tennessee a few years back. I was lying on my back looking at the ceiling, trying to get to sleep late at night, when suddenly something that felt like a pillow hit me hard in the chest. I looked around, there wasn't nothing. But, in the reaction of it hitting me, I screamed. Because my husband was laying there beside me. I ended up jumping out of bed. My husband, who was still awake somewhat, which I didn't know, jumped up out of the bed, started pointing to the corner of the room and yelled, "What the hell is that?" Well, in the corner of the room, there was this big, black, smoky figure. Just kind of looking at us, even though we couldn't see eyeballs. You could tell it was sitting there just leering at us from the corner. We both freaked out, scared the bejesus out of us. Well, it ended up disappearing and going back into the wall behind it. Needless to say, we didn't spend too much more time in that room that night. We got our money back, and we ended up going into another room on a different floor. Thanks, Mike, for sharing. Number 22. Brent says, I got one here for everyone. It's short, but it definitely was something my grandpa related with me whenever I was younger and told me for years. The story never changed. I knew he was not lying to me because my grandpa never made up stories like this. He never really believed in ghosts at all. Never talked about them anyway. Well, he said when he was younger, before he had ever, got a real cars or anything to drive, he had horses back in the country, and he would drive, basically use a horse like you would a car nowadays, going back and forth wherever he had to go, into town and back. Well, he was riding his horse back home one night in the evening, kind of late. He said that he was going down this road and he could feel the horse kind of getting, kind of scared and a little agitated. He thought maybe it was an animal or something, so he was trying to calm his horse down. Well, the horse still was acting kind of jumpy, so he kind of slowed down to try to take a look. He had his rifle with him, of course, to make sure he's back in the country. You never knew what was going to jump out at you in the middle of the country, and there wasn't any street lights or anything, so he wanted to be prepared, right? Well, like I said, he was sitting there going down this road with the horse, and the horse had finally started to calm down. About that time, he felt something jump on the horse's back behind him. He looked around, and he saw this smoky figure. He said he could see it, but he couldn't see its face. He couldn't see no eyeballs anyway. He turned right back around, told the horse, giddy up, and they went trotting down the road to the house. All he kept thinking was, I got to get to my house. I got to get to my house. I'm not looking around. I'm not going to look around. I'm not going to look at this thing again. Well, they rode about half a mile to get to his house. And right before it actually got to his house, this thing jumped off. He said he could hear the feet hitting the ground and trotting off back into the woods. He said he never moved, never turned around, never said, bye, see you later, not a word. What could he say? He said he got home and told my grandma what had went on, and she didn't say anything to him, but he said, I don't know if she ever believed me or not, but it's the truth. He said that's the last time I ever saw that thing, or didn't see that thing. But needless to say, I didn't ride my horse too much after that. I ended up getting a car and not having to worry about what was going to jump on top of the car. Thanks, Mike, for sharing my story. Number 23. Sharon writes, Mike, I don't know if this is really scary or not, but this is something that happened to me that made me think there was more to life than just everyday logical scientific things. Well, I was climbing a ladder one day, working on my house, and had nothing to grip. When I started coming back down, I knew I was going to fall from a pretty good height, and I said, okay, I guess I'm going to get hurt. I guess I'm potentially could die here. Well, as I started to fall down, it was like I took one big step and landed. A young man come out of nowhere to help me keep my balance because I had fallen about 1.5 stories. And this guy actually caught me. I'd always called him my guardian angel after that. And for years and years, we had become friends and more closer than friends. Well, sadly, my guardian angel is now in prison and on death row. He got hooked on drugs and ended up killing one of his relatives for the drugs. This man had the best heart of anyone I've ever known, the biggest heart. And now, because of the devil and these drugs, he's lost everything that's good in him. I still do not go see him myself, but I've always thought about my guardian angel, Tony, over the years. God bless you, Tony. Thanks, Mike, for sharing my story. Number 23. Sean writes, "Hey Mike, I've had several different experiences with the paranormal and supernatural. I'll share one with you. The one that freaked me out the most was my wife and I were in bed around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning in our house. And I kept hearing talking while I was sleeping. I thought it was my wife, so I ignored it because I knew she was asleep and maybe she was talking in her sleep. But then I heard someone scream in my ear, 'What do you want?' So I shot up out of bed to a figure of a woman at the foot of my bed staring at me. She was solid, but yet I could tell that she wasn't real. I looked at her, she looked at me like she was mad about something I'd done or was gonna do or had done. Maybe she thought I was someone else, I don't know. But as soon as I saw her, just as soon as that, she disappeared. Not sure of who that lady was, but we ain't too far from a historic site with a lot of history. So every so often I'll still hear a woman screaming like she's about to be murdered, running past my apartments where we live at. I've grabbed a bat, run outside looking to help this woman over and over, but there's never anybody there. I wonder if it's the same woman that screamed at me in my sleep that night, and I wish there was some way I could help her. Rest in peace, lady, whoever you are." Thanks, Mike, for sharing my story. Number 24. Lynn writes, "Mike, I've seen ghosts ever since I was a kid. One time I woke up to a man standing in the middle of my bed. Not on the bed, but in the bed. Like standing right through it. From his legs down, I couldn't see. Legs, waist up, I could see. It's crazy. Now, my current house I live in is haunted as well. The ghost is a man. I definitely know that. I can feel it. Every now and again, he goes for walks through the house. Hear him walking from one end to the other. Back and forth, back and forth. Keeps us up all night long. If I tell him, that's enough, not tonight, usually I don't hear it anymore. But this happens almost every night, like clockwork. I keep a light on now because of this. And for some reason, when I keep this light on, he doesn't keep me up all night. I'm not scared, but I just need to sleep. Right? Thanks, Mike, for sharing my story. Number 25. Karen writes, "When I was 9 years old, my family lived in an old house way out in the boonies in Winchester, Kentucky. I was lying in bed there one night, and I was at the bottom of the bed. My sister was laying there beside me, and I was sitting there petting our black cat. And I was petting it for a long time, because I couldn't sleep. I heard a noise and turned around to see what seemed to be a room full of ghosts in my room. There was multiple ones. We actually lived in front of an old cemetery, and I thought the two in the front are the ones I remember the most of these ghosts. The man that was dressed in his coonskin hat and, the clothes that they wear with it that you see in the history books. The woman was really pretty with coal black hair. It was really long. And her dress was blue, I believe. And the sleeves hung down off her arm, kind of like Victorian style dresses. They came out to our bed, and I woke my sister up, and she saw them too, and we both were scared to death. I covered my head until morning. Oh yeah, believe that. I'll put that black cat out of our bed, in our bedroom, that night and for every night after for a long time. Maybe it wasn't the reason, but I wanted to make sure that's why I didn't come back. My sister said that it felt like they ran their fingernails down our legs. I don't remember that as much as she does, but I was beyond terrified like she was. The cemetery behind the house had a grave marker Mark Daniel Boone. Now, I don't know if it was the same Daniel Boone that we know from the history books, but the guy I saw that night sure had the same clothing on and the coonskin skin hat that he wore. And I think he was the one with the woman. Maybe the woman was his wife. Thanks, Mike, for sharing my story. Number 27. Sue writes, "Hey Mike, mine wasn't scary. There was a lady that actually lived in my house before we moved in. Her name was Miss Tabor. And she used to come in and she would, when her kids lived there, they said she would check on them, come to each one of their rooms, say goodnight to them, close the door, check in on them every night. Well, we never did know this until we checked the history of the house and talked with some of her relatives after the fact. But the same lady, what we think was Miss Tabor, would come in every night when we was laying there in bed, and they would hear someone coming to the door and open the door. And she would check on us every night in bed, kind of like she was making sure if we was okay. And then we had an organ downstairs that she would play from time to time as well. Up until we moved away from that house, every night this would happen. I never felt scared of her, but I definitely knew that she was there. Thank you, Mike, for sharing my story. Number 28. Anastasia writes, "Hey Mike, I got one here. We lived in Kansas years ago. It's a very busy spiritual place where we lived at. We lived right on the reservation land. I met a lot of Indians while I was out there playing as a kid. They took me into their village and talked to me and told me of the things that would come my way in the future. Now, I woke up and I told my mother this, and she thought that I was dreaming, that this was just dreams and a kid's imagination. But again, this was on reservation land, and we had lived there, and these people were coming to me. Yes, I was dreaming, but they was telling me about things that would come in my future. A lot of these things have come to pass. But in my dreams, there was teepees everywhere, smokes, campfires, busy, busy place. They led me to a place where a family was murdered and told me about it. Told me I needed to tell someone so their spirits could rest. I actually woke up, and after telling my parents over and over, there was a family murdered on our land. They actually called the FBI where I was located at and had the dogs come out and try to search for the family where I told them they were. Well, they actually, after less than a day, they found that family that was missing. And they actually took the bodies and they put them in a cemetery. So I'm hoping that their spirits are at rest. After that, I never had any more dreams about the Indians coming to me. I think that I had done what they asked me to do, and they were happy with me. Nothing like that's ever happened since I was a kid, but I still feel very close to that Indian reservation and that land even till this day when I go back and visit. I appreciate everything they've done for me, and I'm glad I could help them out. Thanks, Mike, for sharing my story. Number 29. Anastasia writes, "Here's one, Mike. I had a visitor I picked up as a kid. Don't know where he come from, but definitely was with me when I was a child. And he still comes in once every blue and a blue moon and has followed me around the world. I became very ill one time and was never bothered as much as I was getting better, and it was back. It sat at the foot of my bed when I was sick. I could feel the weight of it, and I said out loud, 'I thought you were gone. I'm on my own now. I'm stronger than you. Why are you here? I'm recovering.' Just go. Please just go. And it left, but then later that night it came back. And for all those days I sat there on the verge of basically dying, it stayed there with me until I got better. Every time I've ever needed something and someone to be there for me, for support, this thing has always been there. I never thought of it until I got older, but now I think, because I never knew my real father, maybe this could be him, my biological father, that I never got to know. I never met him. My mother said that while she was pregnant, he had beat her and almost killed me in the process. I guess maybe if that was him, this is his penance and way of making up to me what he had done all those years ago. I may never be forgetful of what he'd done to my mother, but I appreciate him being there for me whenever I needed someone. So thank you, Dad. I do appreciate that. Thanks, Mike, for sharing my story.